Hello everyone, I wanted to introduce this year's art show. It's called All American, and it's about all the different types of art which I think are so positive about this country, all the different things that make us a very strong nation. These monarch butterflies are made by pre-K students with Mrs. Applegren, and monarchs are native to North America, so the whole up and down, not just the United States. But they use tissue paper and glue on wax paper and then some paint. But they're so nice on the windows with the sun coming through. This is kindergarten's stitched samplers. I've never had kindergarten sew before, but early American girls as young as 6 would stitch samplers, and it was a way to demonstrate their literacy and their readiness to take on their own household. So they did this as a learning process, and it was often something beautiful to decorate the home. These are first graders' dioramas as a tribute to Horace Pippin, who was an African-American man who was a World War I veteran, and he grew up in Goshen, New York, right near Legoland, I guess. So these are based on his painting called Holy Mountain, in which he is a shepherd taking care of a flock of animals. So first graders made themselves, and then whatever animals they chose, and we arranged them against their painted background. These are first grade paintings based on the work of Jasper Johns. He was a pop artist and did a lot of his work based on numbers and letters, and really always brightly colored, which made it ideal for first grade. I love seeing the color schemes they chose, and the way they arranged their numbers was so different from each other. It turned out really, really beautiful. Second graders made these prints of bison. We learned that buffalo is not the correct term. So they painted the background first, and then they used a piece of styrofoam with a dull pencil and drew their bison, and then created the textures of that very woolly back that they have, and cut it out, and then we printed their bison on the background they created. Third graders made 2 pottery pieces for this year's art show. The first is based on Mimbres pottery, which are very sophisticated designs for art that was made about 1,000 years ago in the Mimbres Valley of New Mexico. So the southwestern part of the United States. They were not glazed. We glazed ours to make it shiny, but they used a black clay or a dark brown to paint the surface and then carve through it. So the students did these designs based on the work that the Mimbres did. Third graders made these pots based on and as a tribute to the emancipated slave David Drake. David Drake made enormous storage jars, a lot bigger than what the third graders made. But even though it was illegal for slaves to learn to read and write, David Drake was able to do both, and he inscribed beautiful poetry on the sides of his storage jars. So this was a very interesting conversation with the third grade, why slaves were not allowed to read and write, and the fact that Drake picked his own last name when he was freed, and what it would be like to not have a last name, and why also people would need big, large ceramic jars. The fact that there was not refrigeration available. We talked about the storage process for food to keep it fresh. So this was a really rich conversation, and then students made these jars or pots of their own and then inscribed them with their own haiku poetry. Fourth graders made these paintings based on the work of Georgia O'Keeffe. Georgia O'Keeffe was 33 years old before women were allowed to vote, which really says something about the fact that she had a career as and is known as a painter when women did not have careers. They did not have much of a life outside of their home and family. And there were so many different parts of this, but she was also very instrumental in introducing abstract art. Previous to Georgia O'Keeffe, flowers were painted in a vase on a table as a still life. It wasn't something that filled the whole canvas and wowed you with the colors and depth and one little tiny amazing flower blown up to a huge scale. So Georgia O'Keeffe broke a lot of boundaries, creating beautiful paintings. Fourth graders also made these cardboard painted faces based on Native American transformation masks. These were made of by the people who lived in Oregon, Washington State, and up in Canada. And so the masks were originally made out of wood. They used straw, feathers, and they were painted so the mask would open over when there'd be another mask inside. So what I love is these pieces when they're partially open, the way the image melds into each other, the two pieces. The two masks kind of merge back and forth, one over the other. They look really great. It wasn't something I anticipated, and everybody did it a little bit differently. So there's one animal on the inside and one on the outside, and they turned out so well. Of course, they're not exactly like the originals at all, but they're so cool. Fifth graders made these cardboard pieces based on the work of Marsden Hartley. He was a native of Lewiston, Maine, and I asked students to explore the depth in his paintings. So they were asked to find the part of the painting that was furthest away from them and build up the surface in layers until they were working on the part that was closest to them. Marsden Hartley was an early abstract painter, and students chose from some of these abstract paintings that he had made and then made their own version, exploring this depth in his paintings. This is another piece made by fifth graders based on the work of American quilter and painter Faith Ringgold. She's an African-American woman that grew up in Manhattan and now lives in New Jersey. So very local, and she has written over 20 children's books, The one we looked at was called Tar Beach, and it talked about when she was growing up how the family would get together on the rooftop. And I talked to the kids about pre-air conditioning. This was a place that people went in the evenings to cool off, and they would bring mattresses up. And in this case, her family got together with another family, and they played cards in the evening and had a nice relaxing time together. So students were asked to make a painting of a family together time, either real or imaginary in case of one fifth grader, and then to include the words as part of their painting, and then they use pieces of fabric to go around the edge. So Faith Ringgold took a craft medium, which is what you would consider quilting these days, and then made art with it by including painting and words. And she is an African-American painter and has brought a lot of notice to this part of the culture and to women. These are made by 6th grade students. They're based on a painting of George Washington crossing the Delaware. This painting is at the Met. It is almost 22 feet long. It is enormous. It's painted by Emanuel Lutz in 1851. There are more than one of them. So 6th graders made their version with, instead of George Washington just launching the boats at the edge of the Delaware, these cardboard figures can actually be moved across so he reaches the other side of the river. This is painted as if it was a stormy day, but 6th graders will tell you that it was actually a beautiful sunny day. And there were other historical inaccuracies that we discussed. But they did a great job making their images of George Washington. And there's even a boat behind the first one that has 2 horses in it, which seems a lot in a small rowboat. Sixth graders made these drawings of buildings in Washington, D.C., and then we've displayed them as they are on the Washington Mall. So each student chose a building and then did a drawing in pen and ink and then used watercolor to color them in. They are not, strictly speaking, all right on the mall, as we do have the National Aquarium and a few other buildings that are on streets that are off the mall represented, but it was nice for students to be able to choose a building they were interested in. These pieces are from Mrs. McManus's doodle elective, which is so great, all these little tiny patterns.